land of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper stretch. Ah, how sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead, where the thin blue line meets razor's edge, and where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death and drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections step by step till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs, all laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer, that 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still, the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You'll let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You'll let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You'll let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide in your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. gun straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you can see it, it's fed. Never your mind, that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, that it bleeds you dry, that it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. People, you don't think I see you crying in your cars, but I do. Sometimes I can feel it at a red light, someone at my side trying to muddle through. See them wiping their eyes in their rear view, like black hole sun in the sky. Why the fuck won't you come when I need you? Well, this moment in time is as close as we'll be, and as far as I'll meet you.
Just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
What's good?
And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously,
No.
we're fucked. We are
Right.
fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, you. Doing good. How are you guys doing?
And as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Pam?
Cheers and salutations. Smoke them if you got them.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
INN News.
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
Yeah! Care Bear's actually Care Bear today. Hi, Care Bear.
No. I'm a deer.
You're a deer.
Yeah.
Well
I'm
then.
a deer today.
Yay.
Like this
Welcome to INN News. Same
Yeah.
bad time. It's always
We're back.
It's Collin. You guys know. You can read. Names are under there. You know who it is already. How are you doing, Care Bear? Doing all
I'm
right?
good. This is my costume for the kids tomorrow since our class name is the deer, delightful deer. I had to be a deer. So,
Nice.
I guess this is our Halloween episode. So,
Yep.
yeah. So I gotta
Well,
wear
if I would have known, I would have done something. You know, like you
you
dressed
have a
up to the
costume?
party. I could have figured something out. You know. So, but anyway, now it's
okay,
like you're at the
depending on
party
how
that
this night goes.
like
Depending
you
on how
said.
this night goes, this might come off.
You said we were
into the
gonna
middle.
dress up. You know. Anyway, we brought stories. We brought
Yes.
stories.
Yes, we did.
Yay.
So yeah, we were away last week because I had an event. Reef had to do some things. So thank you guys for watching our rewind show. Kind of Halloween related, of different clips that different Halloween-esque clips that we have kind of talked about over the last couple of years
Yep.
now.
A bit of
So
nightmare
we're
fuel
probably
for
going to
people.
so we're probably going to do more of those shows in the future, especially if for some reason, what was that?
It was a ghost. Got spooky ghosts.
Yeah. um, so we'll probably do more of those shows in the future, especially if in the event one of us has to do something, or I think it's just good to kind of go back and kind of revisit some of the segments that we have produced that are kind of
Yeah.
more evergreen, as we call them, every once in a while. So yeah, let us know in the chat or in the comments, if you did happen to watch, if you did enjoy it, and whatever themes can we explore that we can probably curate to create more episodes like that in the future. So definitely let us know in the chat or in the comments after the show if you're watching the replay. But yeah, so tonight, I at least tried to pick segments that are somewhat Halloween-y or somewhat horrific in relation to the holiday. So tonight, I'm going to talk about 7 different genocides that the UK has been complicit in over the years, just to kind of give a brief synopsis over each of them, although a couple of them, we've talked about Rwanda before, we've talked about Palestine extensively on this show, but there have been 5 others that you may not know about that we want to mention, and those genocides in themselves could be deep dives, maybe in a future episode. So let us know in the chat if you are interested in learning about these genocides in these countries. And for the record, yes, I know there are 5 flags there. It's just that Iraq had 2 different genocides at 2 different times. So, and I wasn't going to do Iraq's flag twice. So that's why, even though it's 7 horrific genocides, there are only 6 flags. 6 flags. I said 5 earlier, but whatever.
6 flags. Yeah.
And then later on tonight, we've talked about this lady before. She is the main honcho of the settler movement of the West Bank. So she and her minions had a conference where they basically admitted that our job is to get rid of these Palestinians off our land and reclaim it for ourselves. So we're going to talk more about that conference. And while mainstream media will not touch it, this story with a 10-foot pole for obvious reasons. So we're going to talk about this story later. And then I brought in an extra segment, which kind of relates to the election as we're heading into its last few days, thank God. And next Monday will be like the day after. So people will be upset for different reasons by when we go live next week for sure. So it'll be very interesting to see what the end result will be if we know something by next week, because that's also possible. So I found a clip by the late great Harry Belafonte that I thought was interesting, that definitely kind of applies to where we're at and where we're going to be, hopefully, moving forward from this election. So I think it's well worth a watch. And he had 2 surprise people that were actually listening to him that we'll talk about later. But I think it's very poignant he passed away. When did he pass away? I know it was fairly recent.
Last year, maybe?
I want to say last year, because I think we mentioned him briefly in a clip last year. So I think it's definitely within the last couple of years for sure. And I think we pulled something from his talk that he had with the Congressional Black Caucus, but we're going to watch it more in depth because I think it's very poignant to some of the issues we've mentioned on our show, some of our colleagues have mentioned in independent media in general, and probably our future, or at least ideally what our future should look like
Yeah.
after this election. So that'll
Mhm.
be at the end after these stories. And then what did you bring, Reef?
Well, I brought stuff about reparations, but this time for Palestinians, and we'll see how much they might be owed, and how much money is involved over there. And then last week, it wasn't last week, it was a couple weeks ago, I think, we covered the first part of Robert Inlakesh's History of Hamas, Part 1. So we're going to do History of the World, Hamas, Part 2. So we're going to get into that. So that's what I brought. Easy peasy short stuff. So
yeah.
Well, talking about these kind of things is why we're demonetized, So you can always scan this QR code, this one right here. There you go. And, go to co-fi.com/indienewsnetwork. Leave us a $1 dues. Help keep the lights on. Some of you already have done that. Look at all of you. Right? You can also go to CashApp and PayPal. Both of those are also appreciated. cash.app/$IndienewsNetwork. You know how CashApp works by now. You all have bought things. But yeah, appreciate you, fam. Oh, you ready for our first one?
Yeah.
Cool.
Hold on, let me get my screen ready. So as we said in the intro, so this story, many of you, we've talked about Rwanda's genocide. We've talked about what's happening currently in Gaza and death. And we talked a little bit about Nigeria in the past in another segment. But you may not know of these other genocides that occurred in Iraq, Indonesia, and Zimbabwe. And as I said in our intro, these might be worth doing more deep dives on, maybe in the future. So definitely let me know if you're interested in learning more about those, and we'll try and create segments around those other countries. But what these countries have in common in terms of their genocides is how another foreign power, another Western foreign power, has had its complicity in dealing with all of these countries. And it kind of gives a parallel to what the US is doing now in terms of its complicity in what's happening in Gaza. So that Western world power is the UK, is what is mentioned in this segment. So in order to learn more about these genocides, we will go to Declassified UK. This article is written by Mark Curtis, where he writes Gaza, Britain's 7th genocide. Since the 1960s, Labour and Conservative governments have supported or acquiesced in several cases of genocide across Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. So let's continue. Many people in Britain I speak to struggle to understand how their government can acquiesce in, still less support, Israel's genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. We see the killing, maiming, and destruction on a daily or even hourly basis in real time, knowing our government is complicit. It seems incomprehensible to many. But it's only hard to understand if one has a little knowledge of Britain's foreign policy in recent decades, or an overly rosy picture of just what Whitehall stands for in the world. And if people do suffer from that historical ignorance, it is not their fault, but the fault of a media system that refuses to tell people the truth about our past as well as our present. The reality is that, tragically, the UK establishment complicity in genocide is nothing new. There is a long history to Britain backing forces committing genocide, defined as an attempt to destroy a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Two of the closest parallels to our current horror in Gaza come from the 1960s. So this is Genocide 1. The Labour government under Harold Wilson secretly armed and backed Nigeria's aggression against the secessionist region of the Biafra during 1967 through 1970. This was a brutal genocidal campaign that produced the worst humanitarian crisis of that time. During the 3 years of war, up to 3 million people died as Nigeria enforced a blockade on Biafra, causing widespread starvation. Even as pictures of malnourished or dead children made it into the UK press, the British government rolled out significant public opposition to its policy of giving constant support to the Nigerian government. The public was right to protest because the declassified files later revealed just how complicit the British government was. Those documents show that UK ministers secretly provided large quantities of arms to Nigeria, helping facilitate its massacres. Sound familiar, people? They did so to preserve the unity of the country and curry favor with Nigeria's leaders, largely to promote British oil interests, especially those of BP and Shell. So, again, sound familiar, Reef?
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
So, Genocide 2. Just before Biafra, the British Conservative government armed another genocide in Iraq. UK ministers stepped up arms exports to Iraq's regime after it launched what British officials recognized as a terror campaign against the Kurds in 1963. Declassified files showed that Britain sent thousands of rockets to Baghdad, knowing that they would be used to destroy Turkish villages in the north of the country. British ministers also approved the export of hundreds of armored personnel carriers, which they recognized were possibly for use if needed against the Kurds. Alec Douglas Home, Foreign Secretary in Harold Macmillan's government, was anxious that in general Iraq's arms requirements should be met as quickly as possible, one file reads. There are considerable commercial advantages to be gained, a ministerial committee stated, and the scope for military exports is considerable. In another echo of Gaza now, the British also attempted to ensure the United Nations would not discuss allegations of genocide in Iraq. And by 1963, as the war continued, the new Labour government of Wilson was ignoring pleas from Kurdish leader Mustafa Baranzi to prevent Iraq beginning possible chemical weapons attacks against Kurds. So that's 2. Genocide 3, same place in Iraq.
Right.
A quarter century later, similar priorities emerged when Iraq's dictator, Saddam Hussein, launched another campaign of genocide against the Kurds. Most specifically, his forces used chemical weapons against the Kurdish town in Jalaba in March 1988, killing over 3,000 people. How did the UK government under Margaret Thatcher respond? 5 months after Iraq and Iran signed a peace agreement ending the long-running war between them. Although Whitehall condemned Saddam's chemical attacks, UK Foreign Secretary Geoffrey Howe noted in a secret report to Thatcher that opportunities for sales of defense equipment to Iran and Iraq will be considered.
Well, keep in mind who put Hussein in power to begin with. You know, you can go and look at those Mujahideens and funded them and all that jazz. So,
one foreign office official noted, it could look very cynical if, so soon after expressing outrage about the treatment of the Kurds, we adopt a more flexible approach to arms sales. This didn't matter. The UK had already provided an array of arms to Saddam during the early 1980s. In October 1989, Foreign Minister William Waldegrave noted that, I doubt if there is any future market of such a scale anywhere where the UK is potentially so well placed. He added, the priority of Iraq in our policy should be very high. The UK had by then already allowed numerous British companies to exhibit equipment at the Baghdad Arms Fair in April 1989, attended also by weapons salesmen from the government's Defense Exports Services Organization. Human Rights Watch documented the campaign of extermination against the Kurds of northern Iraq during 1987 through 1989, concluded that this resulted in the wholesale destruction of 2,000 villages and the forced displacement of hundreds of thousands. So,
Yep.
All right. Let's go to genocide number 4. The previous decade had witnessed another of the post-war world's worst mass killings when the Indonesian military regime under General Suharto brutally invaded the territory in the East Timor in 1975. The declassified files showed the Wilson government backed the invasion. Britain's ambassador in Jakarta, John Ford, wrote, "Certainly, as seen from here, it is in Britain's interest that Indonesia should absorb the territory of East Timor as soon and as obtrusively as possible. If it comes to the crunch and there is a role in the United Nations, we should keep our heads down and avoid sliding against the Indonesian government," he added. This is what the UK did, and around 200,000 Timorese were killed in the next few years. Wilson's successor as Prime Minister, James Callaghan, proceeded to sell combat aircraft to Indonesia, which were used in its ongoing repression campaign and to help defeat a popular movement for Timorese independence. Right?
I mean, it just sounds like, I mean, we've covered this in Papua New Guinea now too, right?
Yes.
So that's pretty much the sale of arms has been used in genocidal acts in,
right.
I mean, almost everywhere in the global south at this point.
Pretty much.
So, yeah.
All right. Genocide number 5. British policymakers had a hand in 2 other genocides, both in Africa, which had also passed into the historical memory hole. Newly independent Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe conducted atrocities against the Indjele people of, oh boy.
Mugabe is the Indebele? Oh, the other one. Matabeleland.
Matabeleland, yeah. In the southwest of the country in a series of mass killings between 1983 for 1987. Documents show UK officials and the British military advisory training team on the ground had detailed knowledge of the Matabeleland massacres, which resulted in the death between 10,000 and 20,000 people. Yet those officials minimized the magnitude of the atrocities and chose to adopt a policy of willful blindness towards them. Britain was motivated by maintaining the training team in the country and nurturing a positive relationship with Mugabe, somewhat ironical as Zimbabwe's authoritarian leader soon became the UK's bête noire. A decade later, an even more calamitous genocide occurred. The Rwanda slaughter of 1994 is perhaps the best known recent case of genocide to the general public, but the UK role in it is still not widely understood. After the killings, so this is 6, after the killings of members of the Tutsi ethnic group began in Rwanda in early April 1994, the UN Security Council, instead of beefing up its peace mission in the country and giving it a stronger mandate to intervene, decided to reduce their troop presence from 2,500 to 270. It was Britain's ambassador to UN, Sir David Haney, who proposed that the UN pull out its force, to which the US agreed. This decision sent a green light to those who had planned the genocide that the UN would not intervene. A small UN military force arrived nearly to rescue expatriates and then left. Belgium's senior army officer in the UN peace mission believed that if its force had not been pulled out, the killing could have been stopped. Canadian General Romeo Dallaire, who commanded the UN force in Rwanda, later said that its evacuation showed inexcusable apathy by the sovereign states that made up the UN. That is completely beyond comprehension and moral acceptability. By May 1994, with perhaps hundreds of thousands already dead, there was another UN proposal to dispatch 5,500 troops to help stop the massacres. This deployment was delayed by pressure mainly from the US ambassador with support from Britain. Declassified believes that if these troops had been speedily deployed, tens of thousands more lives could have been saved. Similar to the present day in Gaza and Iraq in the 1960s, British officials went out their way to ensure the UN did not use the word genocide to describe the slaughter in Rwanda. This would have obligated states to prevent and punish those guilty. So, again, we've talked about Rwanda in depth. I spent some time in Rwanda a few years ago, and that genocide was close to 1 million within 3 months dead. So just to give you some context of that, for those of you who haven't been are new to the show. In late April 1994, a Security Council resolution drafted by the UK that rejected the use of the term genocide was passed with support from the US and China. A July 1994 resolution spoke of possible acts of genocide, and other Security Council documents used similarly restrained language. The role of the West in Rwanda's genocide has been carefully documented by journalist Linda Melverne, but still largely escapes media coverage in anniversaries and references. Well, I would argue here, at least, that we don't cover it. But in Rwanda, they memorialize the genocide every year from April to July. So, so it's not that it's not covered. It's just that our media avoids covering it for obvious reason. So, how is it that UK governments can be consistently complicit in genocide overseas? The principal reason is that they are not motivated by concerns about international law or supporting human rights. These principles might occasionally inform policy making at the margins, but only when there are no other higher priorities to be pursued, such as securing oil interests, arms exports, or geopolitical gains. High moral principles are largely espoused only for the cameras and complicit journalists who regularly parrot them as though they are important to Whitehall planners. In reality, the UK is concerned about the law and rights only when it comes to enemy states as a means to pressure and isolate them for public relations purposes. Another factor is that ministers are never held accountable for their complicity in crimes overseas, and therefore there is no deterrent for current ministers. They know they can get away with it. We're looking at you, Blinken. Indeed, this impunity is built into the British system. The UK's unwritten constitution is permeated by the concept of crown immunity. This deems that ministers cannot commit a legal wrong and do not act as persons but as agents steeped with crown authority and are therefore untouchable under the law. If a minister breaches the criminal law outside of his public duties, he is subject to criminal law like everyone else. But if she makes decisions as a minister, however irreprehensible or incompetent, these are considered as acts of government and not for the criminal courts. This is why the ICC and other world bodies are needed to hold British ministers to account for their complicity in war crimes, as now over Gaza.
Well, and even that's like, right, like not much power does the ICC have.
Right.
To actually do stuff with.
Right. They're just basically more an advisory group that can make the recommendation, but nothing is necessarily enforced.
Right.
In the case of Gaza, Palestinians are seen as unpeople, since supporting them holds little merit or gain for British planners. What does Palestine have to offer Whitehall in comparison with Israel? In supporting Israel, Whitehall can demonstrate British subservience and usefulness to its major ally, the US. Israel is a buyer of British arms, a strategic ally to police the region, and an increasingly, albeit still, scroll down.
Oh, sorry.
Too much.
Too much. No.
Yeah, but still fairly small trade partner. And a quarter of the UK's entire parliament of MPs have received funding from the Israeli lobby.
Yep.
Buying an influence over UK policy making that is way beyond anything the Palestinians can induce. Unless and until we make our government system promote basic moral values and hold elected officials to account for crimes abroad in a democratic way, the UK will keep acquiescing in genocides in decades to come.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like overall this is preaching to the choir, but, in the way that, in the past that the UK, and again, I didn't even know most of these genocides that the UK has committed, but I did this as a parallel to kind of show that the U.S. has had perfect practice in terms of
we brought
having the
declassified
UK as
stuff
the
on
example to go
about
ahead.
their we talked about their bombs still killing people now because they left them unexploded and testing facilities, and that colonial grip is still pretty strong in a lot of these places. So, and we're seeing that with BRICS too, honestly. Capitalism still being a part of that too. So, I mean, I'm surprised. I'm sure there's more than 7 Britain's been a part
Oh
of
yeah,
too.
for sure. And
So,
as I said, this will probably be worth a deep dive maybe in the future, like to
yeah,
kind of look into some of these genocides more in depth. But what kind of struck me was, I think in people's mind, the reason why, and this is just a guess, the reason why that genocide is not necessarily thrown about too much is because I think people have a certain number in terms of how many people have to die in order for it to be a genocide. So in this case, for a lot of these cases, it's been around what, like 40,000 at minimum, at least from what, kind of what we read, which is about what is being reported in Gaza right now, but more than likely they're a lot more than that. So
right.
it doesn't take many people dying in order to commit genocide. It's just the intent of actually trying to kill off like a people group. So,
Yep.
but I thought this was interesting in terms of, the idea that people are thinking, or now kind of basing the idea of, oh, we have to vote for Kamala because one, Trump is much worse. And then the stupid theory that people have, oh, we can push her left on the issue. Like, you're going to try and push her on the issue after you give away your vote. Makes no damn sense to me.
Yeah.
So, but it just kind of proves that, once again, Israel has a hand in interfering with our politicians' thought processes, that they're not going to do anything. And you're going into voting for Kamala in the hope that she actually will do something when she's given no indication that she will. So in that scenario, it doesn't matter if you have Trump or her. Both of them are going to be complicit in the genocide that's occurring. The only difference is that Kamala might give some niceties somewhat to people, but again, we know that she is tied to the Israeli lobby, especially given her husband is also a raging Zionist.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I mean, yeah, it's just funny that the excuse that people have is that we can push her is really ridiculous.
Yeah, just like they did with the fucking last 9 Democrats. Like, okay, I ain't buying that shit. Good luck with that. So,
right.
I mean, the best you get from them is,
we are deeply sorry.
That's about it. So, but yeah, I mean, same stuff as always. More death and destruction caused by us. So, well, the UK, but we're also complicit. But anyway,
so if you're interested in more stories like these, you can use your phone to scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can go to the link on the bottom of your screen. If you're in chat right now, if you don't remember the link, you can type !donate, and it will pop up in the chat, and then you can give that way. So as we keep saying, and I forgot to say earlier in the show, and now, given that tomorrow's Halloween, it basically is holiday season. So, we know people are going to be starting to buy gifts and food and all the things over the next couple of months. So we know for many people, money will be kind of tight. So we always say, take care of your families, take care of yourselves, take care of your communities first before you give to us. But we will appreciate any extra money, even if it's much as $1 to help us continue to grow this network and to grow this channel, and so that we're able to continue to produce the segments that we do produce. Let us know in the comments if you're interested in learning more about these other genocides that we kind of talked about in this segment. And please don't forget to like. That's very helpful with the algorithm, although I'm fairly certain YouTube doesn't care. But at least we can feed the lie that it does help at least us, and to fight the suppression that we do see on the platform. And be sure to make a comment. We do read them. We do respond to them more often than not. And as a lot of your ideas for segments actually come from your comments. So we do appreciate that feedback so that we're able to create the content for you, and help us get to free K. We've been growing kind of steadily over the last few months, and we hope we can get to free K at some point next year. And thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Before we get to that, we should probably look at some chats. Rumble's full of lizard people today. No opposable thumbs. So what's happening on YouTube? People said you were dressing up as a member of the Bloodhound Gang.
Because the monkey. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's a deer, and unfortunately, because it's kind of tight in the bottom, it's pulling the hood. Actually,
Right.
let me stand up a bit. Maybe this will help, but no, it's tight. So, but,
you got some little
tight on the butt a little bit. It fits, but it the hood goes down. So there it is.
Squats
There
from
we go.
Collin. That's the problem.
So yeah, no, I've seen a lot of comments about my costume. So no, it's a deer. That's
Right.
what I'm dressed up as. And see plenty of deer emoji in the chat.
I'm leaving the link to Rumble over on the YouTubes if you would like to support us on another platform other than what Google owns. You're welcome to head over there. Links to all the channels are always in the description below at indienewsnetwork. If you want to find that stuff. Let's look. Someone said they thought Collin was cold. Just like normal hoodie.
No, it's it's very warm in DC. It's gonna be like 80 degrees, and I have to wear this tomorrow, so I'm gonna die in this. I probably have to bring an extra change of clothes just so I can wear that, and then I can pull this out when I need to. But yeah, it's hot.
So hot and fire. Anyway, all right. You ready for the next one?
Yep.
Readies. Cool. So, Collin, we've talked plenty on the show about reparations, as you are one to do. But we haven't talked about it in relation to Palestine much.
I have.
You have a little bit.
I brought out the idea that they're owed.
Yes.
For that. And, in time, if we ever declare what's happening in Palestine a genocide in the future, then this issue is going to come up. And I'm sure, among the Black community, especially in this country, they might be pissed because, they've been talking somewhat about reparations forever. And the idea possibly that, that we'll see, but the idea is that Palestinians may have that discussion of reparations, and then people might actually do something for them, maybe over Black people. And this is why I kind of say, for Black people who are like, oh, the issue of Palestine doesn't concern me, it will if they talk about reparations.
Yeah.
So it's in your best interest to kind of watch at least kind of be aware of what's going on over there, for this reason alone, if you care about it.
So this is from Juan Cole over at Informed Comment, and they asked, does Britain owe reparations to the Palestinians for engineering their loss of their country? So, we've talked about how Britain's a lot to blame for this problem, between the Balfour Declaration and all that jazz. They, Lots of shenanigans with this. But he continues. Ta-Nehisi Coates made the argument for U.S. reparations for slavery in 2014 in The Atlantic. In that essay, he made an analogy with German reparations to Israel, which we've covered, no? Covered that exact thing, I do believe.
I don't think so.
I think we did.
Might be also worth looking.
I think
don't,
it was
not in depth, but it
you
might be
definitely
worth
covered
looking at.
this bit for sure.
That bit for sure, but not his take on it.
Yep. In his new book, The Message, Coates expresses regret for the unexamined Zionist bases in that analogy, which obscured the disposition of the Palestinian people and their consignment to a form of Jim Crow, something he realized forcefully on a recent trip to Israel and Palestine. Caribbean and African leaders of the British Commonwealth, CNN reports, are insistently raising the issue of British reparations for slavery and for Shanghaiing colonial subjects, shipping Indians off to Guyana and Fiji on false pretenses. British ships transported some 3 million Africans to the New World between 1640 and 1807, 400,000 of whom died in transit. The unpaid labor of these enslaved people and their descendants added significantly to Britain's bottom line. Jamaica, one of London's most profitable colonies because of the sugarcane trade produced by slave plantations, figures Britain owes it $9.5 trillion.
Right. I will say this again because I know the issue that people have with reparations is that people think, oh, it's coming from our taxes.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. No, it's not coming from you. It's coming from these corporations that have gone rich off our backs. That's where it's coming from. So you don't need to worry about my taxes, your taxes coming to me. Well, if I were to be here, I wouldn't receive reparations here, given that I am not, I wasn't, I don't have lineage in America. My lineage is in the Caribbean. So, but it would come from these corporations, not from the taxpayer.
So, once we see that the Palestinians are a deeply injured party, it becomes clear that they are owed reparations. After World War I, the victors divided up the defeated empires at Versailles and the Satellite Conference of San Remo. The League of Nations awarded the great powers mandates, giving them charge of territories on the grounds that they would administer them and also prepare them for independent statehood. This was a new form of colonialism. Since the freebooters of the 18th century conquered countries like India purely from profit, with no obligation to ready it for independence, it has been up to Winston Churchill Britain would still be ruling India and taking money out of it to pay for his brandy and cigars. As I point out in my new book, Gaza Yet Stands, the British Mandate of Palestine was peculiarly compared to all the rest. The British Mandate of Iraq, we talked about a minute ago, eventuated in an independent Iraq in 1932. Formerly, German Tanganyika was a British mandate and became independent in 1961. It joined with Zanzibar, become Tanzania in 1964. Syria, a French mandate, became independent in 1946. The French mandate of Togo became independent in 1961. So just getting our timelines in order. The British Mandate of Palestine, however, did not eventuate in an independent Palestine. The other League of Nations members, including France and Italy, remonstrated with Britain that it had to look after the native Palestinians, despite the Balfour Declaration of 1917, in which the British, who did not then rule Palestine, promised a Jewish national home. There that they pledged would in no way disturb the locals. Well, turns out.
Right, and we talked about the Balfour Declaration on the show. The language of it, at least the way I interpreted it, suggested that, well, Israel would be a national home versus the national home, which is different because the won't it as definitive. Like A represents it as a possibility. So there's a vagueness there that I would argue Zionists you have basically hijacked in order to take advantage of the situation of what is now occurring in the region right now. So it's the idea, like, it can be, what to me it presents the idea of one of other possibilities, not necessarily like the place for you to call your safety home, whatever. That's the argument, is that Israelis feel like they need a country to be considered safe. Well, I'll argue that many of them who live in Europe are probably among the safest, given sometimes class, but more often than not race, especially if you're of lighter complexion.
Well, Lord Curzon wrote in 1920, as regards the Palestinian mandate, this mandate also has passed through several revises. When it was first shown to the French government, it at once excited their vehement criticism on the ground of it almost exclusively Zionist complexion and of the manner in which the interests and rights of the Arab majority, amounting to about 9/10 of the population, were ignored. So this was in 1920 that, like, the French are going, it might not be good. So, which I've not seen a lot of that talked about. We've talked about the Balfour, but I haven't heard a lot of, like, the pushback from it at the time.
Right.
That's kind of gotten whitewashed out of things. So, the Italian government expressed similar apprehension. It was felt that this would constitute a very serious and possibly a fatal objection when the mandate came ultimately before the Council of the League. The mandate, therefore, was largely rewritten and finally received their assent. And I'm sure people got paid off, too, to accept something they didn't want, as they do these days. But the League of Nations, therefore, demanded that the British mandate of Palestine attends to the interests and rights of the 90% of its residents who were native Palestinians. When Palestinians revolted in 1936 to 1939 against the British policy of settling European Jews on their land, the British Army brutally crushed them with the help of Jewish militias like the Haganah. Embarrassed, the British commissioned the MacDonald White Paper of 1939, which pledged an independent Palestinian state by 1949, in which immigrant Jews would form a minority. So, you ever hear that? You ever hear the MacDonald White Paper?
I haven't, actually.
So, they're supposed to have an independent state by 1949. What happened?
That, right. That should be upset.
When was this? They were supposed to have it 1949.
49.
Right? So the British abruptly departed Palestine in 1948, and they failed to prevent the 500 million Jews they had brought to Palestine from expelling 750,000 or so of the 1.3 million Palestinians from their home and usurping all their property, leaving them stateless, homeless, and penniless. Some 250,000 of those refugees were crowded into Gaza, where their descendants are now being genocided by the Netanyahu government. The value of the land seized from the Palestinians at the time is estimated at over $500 million in 1998 dollars. What do you think the inflation rate on that is?
I have no idea, but like,
so, but that 500 million worth of property in 1948 is worth way more today.
Yeah, like it'll be probably in the trillions at this point.
Yeah. The total value of Israeli real estate today is roughly 2.5 trillion. And in 1920, when the British accepted the charge of administering the Mandate of Palestine and turning it into an independent country for its citizens, the Palestinians owned virtually all of the land in it. So, I mean, what, 90% of 2.5 trillion is...
I can't do that math.
yeah, like...
That's too big of a number to do in my head.
So, Juan Cole says that 2.5 trillion is a good place to start for British reparations to the Palestinian That is roughly a year's worth of the UK GDP, but I'm sure the Palestinians would accept an installment plan. So, any thoughts so far?
Honestly, I would think that would be a lot higher than that.
Sure.
Considering that, for now, granted, you can argue like the slave trade at least in America, occurred for a longer period of time, and the estimated cost of reparations to African American descendants of slaves, I believe, is around 14 trillion, if I remember the numbers right. And like the estimated value is 2.5 for Palestinians, which I guess, considering, I guess probably, but the slight difference with this is, like, well, as Sabi says, the idea of reparations is to, not pay off, but to atone for a debt that's owed, and and again, I don't want people to think solely as reparations equals money. It can be, but I think it goes a lot deeper than that. It goes into the terms of, I think, generally healing, which I don't think anyone really talks about, but especially like, and again, I give this example all the time when I went to Rwanda, they're still celebrating, well, mourning really, like the genocide of their people now, and it's been over 30 years. Like, they haven't gotten over that. And so it's a lot more, I think it's very, I think it's very superficial just to think, oh, reparations equals, well, money. It
Right.
can be, I think it's part of it, but more of the idea, and we kind of looked at CARICOM's 10-point plan. Like, it would include, well, in my mind, it would include like systems to kind of help rebuild a country from the devastation that it occurred, to where the idea is, especially with those social justice infrastructure things in place, that such an event will never happen again. So in Gaza's case, it's the idea of, like, as we've talked about numerous times on the show, their whole entire infrastructure has been leveled. So people are like, oh, Trump is going to level it. It's been leveled already.
Yeah.
Like, there are no schools, there's no hospitals, there's no homes. There's
Someone
nothing
said the other
on it
day,
right now. It's been leveled already.
What could he do that's worse other than dig up the bodies and bomb them again? Like, you can't, not possible.
Right.
So
like, people are dead already. So it's the idea of, like, for the people who survive, how can they rebuild not just the infrastructure, not the physical needs, but also, like, I'm also just thinking mental health. Like, how to rewire the brain from the devastation that you're seeing. So that includes healthcare, that includes education, that includes, restoration of families and friends and neighbors and uncle and like that are gone. Like, literally having to rebuild a people group up. So that takes, so really it's very complex. And I think the more I think about this, we don't, again, it's so superficial that we talk about reparations in terms of money, because it's just like, oh, these people are getting a check, and then there's the idea of, like, oh, well, like, they get a check and they go on their merry way. Yeah, you can have the money, and we kind of see it, with politicians or people in power.
Classically, it was about land, not money, which,
right,
like, land has been stolen from the Palestinians. Land has been stolen from your people. They were taken from the land that they once were a part of. So, I think that's the key, giving them that couple of acres might not be a bad idea as far as that's concerned.
Right. Right. But it to me, it doesn't make having all the land that get back to you doesn't make it any better if your family was killed over that land.
Yep.
You can get back the land. And I argue, depending on the pollution, like that could be a whole other issue in of itself. But I think relatively, or at least theoretically, you can reverse that damage. You can't bring back people. You can bring back those family members who are gone. So I just think it's a lot more deeper and a lot more complex than I think we're willing to discuss. And so this is why I kind of get upset, like with people just being like, it's about, I think that's just kind of very basic in terms of it's about the money. No, it's not just about the money or the land or whatever else. It's about the people who are lost, that people would need, like, again, mental health, therapy, like those conversations in order for them to feel not even whole. I'm not sure if you can even feel whole after, like, if you go through something like that, but at least being in a position where you can possibly rebuild and have a people group kind of reborn from that damage. So I think it's a good start, but I think that's only like the floor in terms of the work that needs to happen. And I think we kind of discussed this a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the two-state solution thing that has been passed on. It's like it's been viewed as a very lazy way of thinking about it, when the real solutions are going to be a lot more complex and a lot more comprehensive than just what the two-state, or just give some land to Israelis and give some land to Palestinians and go about their merry way and have it be done with. No, there's history there. Like, there's tension still there. And like, that has to also have to kind of be resolved and kind of work through. And that's going to take decades to even kind of get to a point where, if there were even be a one-state solution where people would somewhat, I would argue, at minimum, tolerate each other, like Israelis and Palestinians, if it were to be that way. So all of that, I'm just basically saying there's a lot more that is going into reparations than just the money. So I kind of wish, I honestly wish that there could be more discussions as to, I think, the psychological aspect of reparations too, and the mental aspect of it too. I understand like the financial part, because people, I think, generally have an understanding of that. But, there's the idea of like, families are gone. Like, people have lost body parts, like schools are destroyed, hospitals destroyed, the land is corrupted and polluted. Like, there's a whole lot of work and a whole lot of money, I think, to even bring that up to a level where it could be livable.
That's the thing. I think the money is still there, which I brought this video that kind of explains why they're even still doing what they're doing, right? And it's mainly for resources, as it usually is, but I'll let this lady explain some of it.
Okay. I can't hear it.
You can't hear it? How about I fix that?
Only 9 kilometers away from an ongoing genocide for 8 months and continuous massacres committed for people who are living in tents, were forced to displace their tents, an American ship stealing gas on the beaches of Gaza. And instead, they're preventing the real Palestinian fishermen from entering and bringing food to the people starving here, because they are closing the borders. This is how America is rolling the world. Whenever and wherever they find anything that worth a genocide, they commit a genocide without thinking twice. This is why a genocide is now ongoing in Gaza, to steal the lands of Gaza to the Israelis and to steal the gas of Gaza to the Americans. That's it. This is the deal, my dear world and my dear people. And unfortunately, nearly all the people, all the world knows that, but no one is stopping the main reason. The colonizers, the American colonizers, from stealing the wealth of people and of nations. This is the main reason behind every genocide and every colonization in the world until now. Okay? Another thing you need to know also is that they found a very large, massive quantity of gas on the beaches of Gaza on the 2000. They are, planning for this genocide since the year 2000. But now is the real timing. I mean, they don't wanna rely on other gases. I'm talking about the East gas. I'm talking about Russia gas. Now they can steal this gas. In Arabic we say ما قدروش على الحمار سطروا على البردعة. Now go and translate this and you'll know what I mean. Long live our Palestinian fishermen, our Palestinian workers, and our Palestinian people who are suffering despite everything, and suffering because of the colonizers, because of those who only want money and nothing but money. There, standing there, watching us being killed because of their freaking gas.
Closing thoughts?
I mean, as I said, I think the whole topic of reparations in general, I think, is a lot more complex than I think what people make it out to be. And I do think it should be seriously talked about, and definitely for Black people, such as myself, but I think especially for Palestinians. And I hope there will come a point where that discussion among Palestinians can be discussed. But that's why I say, again, to Black people in particular, this is why you need to be more concerned with what's going on in foreign policy. Because if in any event, Palestinians are going to get reparations, or the idea of reparations before you're going to feel slighted, for sure. So in my mind, it's in your best interest to kind of at least see where this is going. And then, and I just kind of say, especially in terms of reparations, yes, I understand that Black people in the West have different cultural things that make our kind of reparations, depending on what region you're from, maybe slightly different, but it's still from the same cause. So I would think it would make sense to you all to kind of unite in terms of what those commonalities are. That's what we call solidarity, in order to fight for those things on a larger scale. And even in the article, it mentioned that, and we've kind of talked about on the show that, Caribbean and Black Europeans have been leading the charge of talking about reparations, and have spoken to politicians in higher places of government about it, or at least call them out about it. You don't hear that kind of discussion necessarily in Congress here. Now, granted, it's just talk, but at least in the Caribbean and in Europe, like, the discussion, I think, is being had at least of people in higher levels of government. That issue is not necessarily being touched here. Like Kamala mentioned, oh, we just need a study. Girl, the studies have been done. So it's whether or not you have the balls to actually follow that through. And I know some of you, even in our chat, are not necessarily going to agree with me on the idea of reparations. But again, if you believe in social justice, which I know many of you do, then you should acknowledge the fact that Black people in this country, I will say, have been wronged, and that a debt is owed to them, given the history that we've gone through. But as I said, it's a lot more complex than just money and land. That
Mhm.
I believe that there is a mental psychological component of reparations too that also should be discussed. And I think, and I think especially moving forward, we should be having those discussions more openly.
No, I agree. But talking about these things, that's why we're demonetized. You can go to co-fi.com/indienewsnetwork or scan that QR code on your screen. And remember, INA News is brought to you by viewers like you. If you can't do that, we get it. It's hard out here. Just like and subscribe, do all the engagement stuff that's supposed to help. Make sure to share this with your friends if you feel like it'll help them. But, leave a comment. We read those. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Yeah. Yeah, we did it. To the chat, Scare Bear.
Yeah.
Cowboy Kitty, can Collin get in my headlights?
No. No, Maleki, I will not. Love you, bro. Let's see. I've seen a lot of Dodgers Yankees scores right now.
Sports ball.
Those of you who are watching the World Series.
Individualism over on the Rumble. I think 99% deserves reparations from COVID PTSD. We are all still suffering in, at minimum, mental health counseling. I'm more than okay with free and public, all of that. So,
Driving Me Macy. I think minimum wage is pathetic, and I agree with Sabby on that. They continue, and a lot of people don't think minimum wage is a big deal because they raised it in most states. Mine didn't. $8 to $9 is normal in this rural town. What state is this?
Yeah.
If you don't mind sharing, and probably South. Do you mind sharing which state you're in? But even with that,
we've talked about.
Sabby brought up a good point. Like
trying to get
in Massachusetts,
state right stuff is the problem.
Right. But Sabby even mentioned, like I think she did like a talk at a church that I'm familiar with in Boston, I think over the weekend. And she mentioned that Massachusetts has had 15 minimum wage forever.
Yeah.
But with inflation now and with the cost of living up there, that's not enough. Like I've mentioned this even I think last year, where our minimum wage here is 17, but there have been places in DC that have been striking for more than 17. Because 17 is not even enough. It's definitely not enough to live on here. So we're past the idea of even 15. We should be talking. Honestly, we should be talking a living wage, which depending on the state would be around, I'll say on average, like 25, but at least 20, I would argue, is what we should be discussing at this point. Like 15 is long.
Even that's like low ball at this point.
Right. No, but right. But
even
it's
for
like,
Mississippi's like bare minimum cost of living is like something like what, 18 we looked at?
Something like that, yeah.
Driving Me Macy said Tennessee. End Imperialism over on the Rumble said Iowa is still $7.25 an hour. So
Jesus.
That's fun. But
like I know Sabby talks about BI a lot, but like if you're going to be voting, if you choose to vote, if you are in a BI state, if your state is talking about increasing the minimum wage, that to me would be worth you voting for at least. If you're in a BI state,
it's like even Florida did that 5 years, like did it a while ago, and it still hasn't taken effect.
Right.
So and that was for like 15. So it's like they're just gonna time us out. Like I have an issue with the whole system in regards to BIs on top of that, but that's beside the point. you know,
I
even
think
the
it
legal
also
weed
depends.
stuff on the
Yeah, I
ballot
think it
right now
definitely
is,
depends on the state too, because even in
yeah,
DC, they did some shenanigans with a BI thing a few years ago. Like we voted it in, and then some mess that they didn't go through with it, and I think people rebelled about it, and then voted on it again, and it passed again, and then it actually went through. So I
right.
think even with BI, it's still a matter of having to fight for it. And we say this all the time. It's not like once you get it, you dust off your hands and go home and give yourself a good job. No, you have to maintain it and demand more.
Yeah.
So, try and get every bit you can get in order to get what you want. So it's a continuous fight, not like something that you just kind of do in the moment and then, turn your back once you get it.
Yeah. Well,
So
you ready for our next one?
yeah.
Cool. Let's do it.
So yeah, this cretin is back.
Mhm.
So we've talked about her definitely like last year around this time.
Does he look like a bitch?
What?
Because so this is Daniela Weiss. For those of you who do not know, she's one of the top settlers in the West Bank who is very, what? I respect her as far as her total honesty. Like she's basically a raging lunatic in terms of actively verbalizing her desire to get rid of Palestinians from the West Bank and to resettle the West Bank. But now they're talking about, not just the West Bank, but also in Gaza as well. So there was a conference that a lot of these demons attended that Daniel Weiss was a part of. And surprised but not surprised that this did not get any mainstream media coverage.
Coverage? Of course not. I mean, it barely
Of
gets
course not.
independent coverage. I think I saw maybe
Right.
one or two people, and they're the people I would expect to talk about it, So,
Right.
like,
So we're going to do it because we can and we should.
yeah.
But I didn't put him here, but this is this written by
Brett.
friend to the network, Brett Wilkins.
Mhm.
Also Indian award winner from 2022.
Yep.
Yep. So he was in that inaugural class. We've had him on a couple of times. We probably should have him on again at some point. But he wrote this. So he wrote, "Conquer, kick out, resettle. Israel's far-right gathers to plan ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Each of you will witness how Jews go to Gaza and Arabs will disappear from Gaza," said one prominent Israeli settler. So Brett continues. Hundreds of Israelis, including numerous senior state officials, gathered Sunday near the Gaza border for a festive two-day rally at which members of Prime Minister Ben Netanyahu's government and leaders of the settler movement zoom out. I'm good. Openly spoke of ethnically cleansing Palestinians in the embattled coastal enclave to make way for Jewish recolonization. "We came here with one clear purpose: to settle the entire Gaza Strip, every inch from north to south." Daniela Weiss, who co-founded the extremist settler movement Nachala, which organized a rally backed by Netanyahu's Likud party, told attendants on Monday, Likud, sorry, told attendees on Monday as joyous music played in the background. "Where thousands of people are ready to move to Gaza at a moment's notice," she continued. "October 7th changed history." Okay.
Well, sure.
Made
As y'all super scared.
Right. "As a result of the brutal massacre, the Ghazian Arabs have lost their rights to be here forever. They'll not stay here.
Okay.
We plan to take what we have acquired in years of settling Judea and Samaria and do the same thing here in Gaza," Weiss asserted, referring to the historical Jewish names of the illegally occupied Palestinian West Bank territories being gradually usurped by Israeli seizure and settlement. Each of you will witness how Jews go to Gaza and Arabs will disappear from Gaza. I want to say to the world, this isn't just for the Jews. We're doing this for the benefit of the entire world, added Weiss, who earlier this year was sanctioned by Canada for inciting violence against Palestinians in the illegally occupied West Bank. Ending the evil powers for everyone. I call on the democracies of the world to stand with us. Adopt the values of the Bible.
Okay.
Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, leader of the far-right Jewish Power Party, told attendees, "What we have learned this year is that everything is up to us. We are the owners of this land." So, in case you want to hear more of this Cretan speak, this is a tweet from Rachel Hinkle where she basically has a recording of her going into her spiel. So if you want to play it, you can go ahead and read.
So we plan to take what we acquired in the years of settling Judea and Samaria and to do the same thing here in Gaza. I want to tell you now that in less than a year, each one of you can call me and ask me, did you succeed in fulfilling your dream? And the answer will be, yes, actually, you don't have to call me, because you will witness how Jews go to Gaza and Arabs disappear from Gaza.
Yeah, how did they do that? How'd they disappear, you fucking crazy white lady? Anyway.
Yes, we experienced a terrible catastrophe, he added. But what we need to understand 1 year later, so many Israelis have changed their thinking. They understand that when Israel acts like the rightful owners of this land, this is what brings results. May Golan, Minister for Social Equity and the Advancement of the Status of Women in Israel, told rallygoers, "We will hit them where it hurts, their land. Anyone who uses their plot of land to plan another Holocaust will receive from us, with God's help, another Nakba,"
Jesus
Golan added,
Christ.
referring to the ethnic cleansing of more than 750,000 Arabs from Palestine by Jewish militants during the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948. Around 2/3 of Gaza's population are descendants of Nakba refugees. Seema Hansen of the group Mothers Parade told the audience that, "I am going to say something that not everyone is prepared to say, but I am, and I know a lot of you are. Conquer, kick out, resettle."
Hey.
So, there's a clip here. I'm not going to play it, probably due to copyright. Is sure anyway. He doesn't say anything, but Rachel Fink tweeted, "Far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir leads a crowd in song at the Preparing to Resettle Gaza conference, which took place over 2 days on Israel's southern border with Gaza. Ben-Gvir was greeted by eager applause from the crowd. "We are the owners of this land," he told them, "and when we act like it, this is what brings results." He repeated his call to encourage Gazians to voluntarily, quote unquote, transfer to other countries because that land belongs to us.
Yeah, this is the bullshit we've heard from them before, where it's like, oh yeah, no, they volunteered to leave. Yeah, fuck you. Like,
I'm not just talking about one area of Gaza, she continued. I'm not just talking about northern Gaza. I mean every single sliver of land. It's the only way we'll save our boys from constantly going to war. To everyone in Europe who has an opinion about what's happening here, I say, don't get involved, Hamstrom added. Worry about yourselves. Radical Islam is taking over your whole continent. You want to help? Take in the Gazians who want to leave Gaza. Other cabinet ministers who spoke at the rally include Finance Minister Bezalel
Smotrich. Yeah.
Of the Religious Zionist Party, and Negev and Galilee Minister Zitak Wasfalov, that's German, of Jewish Power. Knesset members in attendance include Ariel Connor, Avishal Bolaron, Usher Salakim.
Shika-
Sorry for pronouncing his
Shikalim.
names wrong, but who cares?
Tali
Taligovic and Sasson
Sasson
together of
Likud. Zvi Sukkot of the Religious Zionist Party.
And Limor son Hamelech from Jewish Power. We need to occupy the complete land of Israel. There are no innocent people in Gaza, Golev told Middle East Eye. Everyone who has refused to leave the north is a collaborator. There are no innocent people in Gaza.
I mean, they're just telling on themselves now, huh?
Right, basically. And that's why it's not being reported in mainstream media, because they straight up give the whole game away.
Yeah.
So while numerous Israeli officials called for the recolonization of the Gaza Strip prior to the October 7th, 2023 Hamas-led attack, such calls have accelerated since then. In January, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and other senior Israeli officials attended a similar but smaller conference hosted by Netanyahu on the Jewish recolonization of Gaza. Last year, Amir Whitman, who chairs Likud's libertarian faction, published a plan examining the economics of forcibly transferring Gazians to Egypt's Sinai Desert.
Yep.
A separate 2023 proposal by then Intelligence Minister Ila Gamliel, who is also a Likud member, would ethnically cleanse Palestinians from Gaza, forcing them into the Sinai.
Which we've talked about. Go look at Israel's secret plan on the channel.
Yes.
That covers that specifically.
Monday's rally came as Israeli military continued its relentless 381-day assault on Gaza, which has left more than 152,000 Palestinians dead, maimed, or missing, and for which Israel is on trial for genocide by the ICJ. In recent weeks, Israeli forces have intensified attacks on northern Gaza, seen by numerous observers as part of the coastal strip most likely to be seized by Israel, including Saturday airstrikes in Belit Halia, in which more than 120 Palestinians were killed, wounded, or missing. The intensified assault comes as some Israeli troops claim the Israel Defense Forces have launched a so-called General's Plan, a blueprint for the starvation and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from northern Gaza, and has been reported aid has been blocked by Israel into the strip since the beginning of the month.
And they recently made UNRWA like illegal or whatever.
Right. The U.S., which provides Israel with tens of billions of dollars in military aid and diplomatic cover, last week warned Israeli leaders against any such policy of starvation, which critics countered is already being implemented throughout Gaza with deadly results.
Yeah.
More than 20 Israeli settlements were built in Gaza following Israel's conquest of the territory during the 1967 Six-Day War. While Israeli troops and settlers withdrew from Gaza in 2005, the besieged enclave is still considered occupied under international law, as Israel maintains a physical and economic stranglehold on the territory. There's one more tweet that I pulled from Asai Rod, where she writes, "Hey, New York Times, BBC World, Washington Post, Reuters, AP, CNN. This is why Israel is doing. My ministers openly talk about illegally settling Gaza. This is a picture of ethnic cleansing. It should be your top story, but it's not. And it would not be if it were a picture from Ukraine." So this is a tweet. We posted this from Hind Kalari, who basically tweeted, "You either live or die." So, yeah. So this is the reality of what's happening in Gaza right now. But Trump will make it. Much worse.
Make it worse, bro. Yeah.
As in the occupied West Bank, Israel's settlements in Gaza, as well as the occupation itself, were illegal under international law. In July, the ICJ issued an advisory opinion saying that Israel's 57-year occupation of the West Bank and Gaza is an illegal form of apartheid that must end as rapidly as possible. However, in language resembling the Palestinian liberation slogan "From the river to the sea," Likud's founding platform states that between the sea and the Jordan River, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. on multiple occasions over the past year or so, Netanyahu has publicly displayed maps showing the Middle East in which there is no Palestine, and that all Palestinian lines are labeled as Israel, which we've talked about before recently.
Yeah.
Again, preaching to the choir, and again, don't want to talk that bit more, but I think this story is important because this just goes to show, number one, they have been extremely open about their intentions. We've talked about their intentions on this show.
Yeah.
But again, given that, like initially it was just the West Bank that they were trying to take over, and now they're pretty much being, now with this assault, they're pretty much being open to kind of saying, no, we want Gaza too. And given the escalation that we're seeing, you can argue Lebanon as well. So any last thoughts?
Nope. I mean, we talked about them pushing them into Egypt before,
Yeah.
like, which they wanted all the way up to the Nile, which I guarantee you, the minute they push refugees into Egypt, it'll be, well, Egypt hates us now too, so we have to take their land. It's going to be just more of the same. So, I mean, that's literally not just me saying that. That's them saying that. Like,
Right.
So I wish it were just speculation. It's not. But, yeah, I mean, like, again, this lady's been evil for quite a fucking while. I'm not surprised,
Yeah, and
but
honestly, it's surprising to me that she's not getting any more attention in mainstream media than I believe she is,
yeah, like,
because
not many people even know who that person is. So,
right.
And we've covered it partially because, they're just trying to blame this all on Netanyahu, right? Put it on the figurehead. And when in reality, it's like there's an entire culture over there that's part of the problem. So, including these people and Ben Gavir and, like, I mean, you name it, there's a Zionist over there that is more than willing to just wipe everything out. So, and like, yeah, I mean, I hope we just don't hear this.
Tactical nuke incoming!
That would not be great. So,
I mean, considering what we're doing, and regardless who will become president, I feel like that's going to happen. I wouldn't be that. I mean, we're due for that. I say that with fear and condemnation, with fear, but I feel that will probably happen if we continue to do what we're
certainly
doing, or at least kind of being complicit in what we're doing in Israel.
worried about Iran for those reasons too. So,
Right.
And they have more than enough reason to at this point. But yeah.
But shout out to Brett for reporting on this story. But the catch is, reporting on the stories is why we're demonetized on YouTube. So if you want to help us out, so we're able to highlight independent journalists such as Brett, being able to keep him employed and to keep us from not being fully suppressed on YouTube, as well as probably other platforms. Well, who knows? You can scan the QR code or go to the link that you see at the bottom of your screen if you would like to donate to INN. And as always, as we say, please take care of your family first before you, and your communities before you take care of us. But any donation up to even as little as $1 will be extremely helpful. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and to share our content to help us fight the suppression that we're seeing on YouTube. And make sure you leave a comment. As we say, a lot of our segments come from ideas that you kind of share or stories that you kind of share. So please let us know what stories you would like us to cover, such as this, and help us get to 3K so that we're able to continue to grow and we're able to get to more people. And thank you for watching.
All right. To the chats. Beep, 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 beep. So imperialism said should be $40. That would barely put you into the green at $83K a year over on the Rumble. I think in relation to our last discussion. So imperialism sent us a little tip on CashApp. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So yeah. What's over on the YouTubes?
I haven't seen anything new there.
Cool.
Yeah.
No. I'm ready to get to our next one. So
Yep.
we got an extra story to get to anyway. But all right. So last week, Care Bear, we covered, well, not last week, a couple weeks ago, right? We covered the history of Hamas, right? Because clearly most people don't know about it. Clearly I don't know not much about it as I should. So figured we do some more history lessons, right? So Robert and Lakesh, now new Indie Media Award honoree. So
yeah, by the way, watch so Indie and Reef released this new class of honorees at the Indie Media Awards that they premiered on Sunday, so definitely check that out.
Check that out.
And clips from that stream will be forthcoming, but Robert has, I think, we've featured a lot of his articles over the past year. So I think he's definitely well deserving. And I think when we talked about it, like he was immediately like, yes. So he definitely deserves it just due to his work, especially his reporting and deep dives in terms of the history surrounding Israel, Palestine, and what's happening now. So we appreciate you, Robert. We would love to have you on to interview you if you ever do watch this. We would love to have you on and interview you, man, but we really appreciate you.
Yep.
Did Israel?
Well, we'll let him speak on this matter and get us started. Give you volume and
Israel really use Hamas to derail the Oslo peace process and kill the two-state solution? Well, I'm Robert N. Lakesh, and over a year into the Gaza genocide, the Hamas movement that leads the armed resistance against Israel's assault is still misunderstood. In light of media mischaracterizations, we continue to see Hamas compared to ISIS, blamed for Israel's actions, and there are those who even say Israel created and continues to control the group. A few weeks ago, we published part 1 of this video series where I explained the origins of Hamas, separating fact from fiction, regarding the funding of the group, its historical climate, and how it emerged as the most popular Islamic party in Palestine. So, in this video, I'll seek to explain what's wrong with the argument that Hamas was responsible, along with an Israeli right-wing fringe, for derailing the so-called peace talks aimed at securing a two-state solution. But, as usual, to address such a question, we have to turn back to history.
So that's what we're going to do. But do go check out our coverage of his last installation of this. Should be able to find that on the channel pretty easy. But he writes, when the Declaration of Principles was signed between the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Israel in September 1993, I was born in March, Collin, of that year. So that I would have been like a couple months, you know? It marked the end of the first Intifada. The mass Palestinian uprising brought Hamas to prominence as a political force. Many viewed the Oslo Accords as a beacon of hope, a chance for peace in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. However, the path to failure had been set long before Hamas became a significant factor. To understand why Oslo ultimately failed, we must rewind to 1974, when PLO chairman Yasser Arafat addressed the UN, famously offering peace while upholding the right to armed struggle. This followed the PLO's issuance of a 10-point plan, which many saw as paving the way for dialogue with Israel. Israel's response was to reject what it described as a terrorist group's peace offensive. What? Huh? What the hell is a peace offensive, Collin? Like, does that make sense to you? Like,
No, it all sounds like an oxymoron.
Yes,
to me.
Quite literally. Interestingly, Israel Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who once labeled the PLO a terrorist organization, would later go on to sign the Oslo Accords with Arafat. So, what changed, Care Bear? What do you think did that? Well, you're gonna find out.
بغصن الزيتون في يدي وببندقية الثائر في يدي فلا تسقط الغصن الأخضر من يدي.
The Israeli response to this was rejection of what they called a terrorist group's peace offensive, expressed here by Israel's Yitzhak Rabin, who actually would later go on to sign the Oslo Accords with Yasser Arafat.
And so you have the statement of the Security Council chairman, which speaks about inviting the representatives of the terror organizations.
So, what changed? Well, by 1981, the Arab League had ratified the Fez initiative advocating for a two-state solution, which the PLO was ready to consider. However,
so did you catch that? What's in there? So, Israel withdraw from all captured Arab territories, including East Jerusalem, the dismantling of Israeli settlements in Arab territories, the assurance of the freedom of worship for all religions, the recognition of the rights of the Palestinians for self-definition, which will be implemented through their exclusive representative, the PLO, a several-month transition period for Gaza and the West Bank under the auspices of the UN, the establishment of a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital, the guarantee of the UN Security Council for the peace and security of the states in the area, including the Palestinian state, and the guarantee of the UN Security Council for the implementation of above-mentioned principles. So, any questions on what they wanted?
I mean, no, but you...
Right. So, advocating for a two-state solution, which the PLO was ready to consider. However, Israel's response was not peace, but war. In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon, forcing the PLO to flee to Tunisia and killing around 20,000 Palestinians and Lebanese. This conflict severely weakened the PLO, diminishing its capacity for both armed resistance and political leadership. As the Palestinian Intifada erupted in the late 1980s, the PLO struggled to take control of the uprising that was led locally inside the occupied territories. During the Intifada, the PLO also lost one of its biggest financial backers, Kuwait, after the PLO sided with Iraqi President Saddam Hussein during the First Gulf War. Meanwhile, Israel faced a public relations crisis. Images of Palestinian youths throwing stones painted a David versus Goliath narrative that Israel couldn't combat. Recognizing the unsustainable economic and security cost of the occupation, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, infamously known as the Bone Breaker for his brutal crackdowns on non-violent protesters, finally agreed to a deal with the severely weakened PLO, leading to the creation of the Palestinian National Authority. This meant that the administrative and security role in the West Bank and Gaza, in what are known as Areas A and B, were taken off the hands of Israel, while the Israelis still maintained their full occupation of the majority of the territories in what is labeled as Area C. Better yet, the Palestinian Authority was funded by the US and EU, making Israel's occupation cost-free and enabling them to allocate their military resources elsewhere. Hamas, which had emerged during the Intifada, rejected the Oslo Accords along with other Palestinian factions. In 1995, following the massacre of Palestinians at the Ibrahimi Mosque in the West Bank by an Israeli extremist, Hamas carried out a series of suicide bombings.
Wow, Collin, Israeli extremists. You ever hear about them? You ever hear that shit happening? I bet you haven't.
That same year, Israeli PM Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated by a right-wing Israeli, and by 1996, Benjamin Netanyahu had ascended to power, pushing the situation towards further violence and unrest, leading to the Second Intifada in 2000 that erupted after hopes for a two-state solution were crushed.
So, any thoughts so far?
No. I mean, I'm part of the course
Yep.
for Israel.
Well, we continue. Hamas has often been blamed for the failure of peace talks and the Israeli government's refusal to compromise. However, the group was far from the first to use suicide bombings. Palestinian Islamic Jihad introduced the tactic in 1989, with several groups contributing to similar attacks throughout the 1990s. The peak of these attacks occurred during the Second Intifada in the early 2000s, while Hamas was responsible for 39.9%. Fatah, Islamic Jihad, and especially the Marxist-Leninist socialist organizations, the PFLP, accounted for the remainder. Hamas's violence came in direct response to Israel's own wantonly violent policies, including continued settlement expansion, apartheid, and, of course, an ongoing military occupation, all of which played significant roles in derailing the peace process. Even as armed Palestinian groups were crushed in the West Bank, especially during Israel's Operation Defensive Shield, which probably was offensive. They like their oxymorons over there. Hamas's resilience in Gaza compelled Israel to rethink its approach. By 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza, but not before securing control over the West Bank, restructuring and repurposing the Palestinian Authority's security forces to ensure their coordination with Israeli occupation forces. Right? So that's I think the thing. The Palestinian Authority security forces had to work in coordination with the IOF, pretty much. Right? So successive Israeli governments, including those led by Netanyahu's Likud party, continued expanding settlements in direct contravention of international law, all while placing the blame on Hamas for stalled progress. The narrative of a so-called Hamas-Netanyahu radical alliance, promoted by some liberal Zionists, centers less on Hamas's actions and more on deflating responsibility from Israel's policies. So, I guarantee you Miss Daniela Weiss was a part of that, no? So,
sure. Don't trust the liberals. They will betray you.
In the post-9/11 era, Islamic extremism became a convenient boogeyman for Israel in 2008. Netanyahu himself stated the September 11 attacks were beneficial for Israel because it had found a new equivalent to the Soviet Union in Iran and to the PLO in Hamas, arming itself with two new public relations tools. The first was to assert that the Palestinian Authority was not a rational negotiator for peace, and the second was to frame Israel's own Al-Qaeda-type problem using the specter of Islamic terrorism as a distraction. So, even as... Make sure I'm on... There we go. Borrowing from the battle-tested strategy of the post-9/11 Bush administration, today, Netanyahu claims that October 7th was Israel's September 11th. It's the same playbook used to advocate twice for U.S. military action in Iraq. However, Al-Qaeda was a transnational terrorist organization whose founders were armed and trained with CIA assistance to counter Soviet-backed government in Afghanistan. The only real commonality between Al-Qaeda and Hamas is they share a common faith, Sunni Islam. However, each organization has distinct goals and origins. Al-Qaeda emerged as a transnational answer to the U.S. wars in the Middle East, whereas Hamas was founded with a focus on Palestinian national liberation. And they're trying to conflate the two even now. So, but I will let Inlakesh finish some of this up for us.
In the end, while Hamas may have played a role, along with every other Palestinian armed movement, in allowing Israel to justify its hardline stance, It was not the primary reason for the failure of the Oslo peace process. The roots of that failure lie in a combination of factors, including Israel's strategic decisions, continued occupation, US unconditional support for Israel, and the broader dynamics of Palestinian resistance. If Hamas was the real problem, why is Israel still building settlements, killing civilians, and tightening its control over the West Bank, a territory where the Palestinian Authority preaches nonviolence and cracks down on its own people who resist Israeli occupation through force? This is because the ideology really doesn't matter. It is the fact that Palestinians are using armed resistance against the expansion of a settler colonial project on their land, as Palestinians have been doing since the Arab Revolt of 1936 and even before that. In fact, every major Palestinian political party, whether they be secular nationalists, Marxists, or Islamists, are considered to be terrorist groups by Israel, with the current exception of the mainstream branch of Fatah, which rules the Palestinian Authority. Yet prior to the Oslo Accords, Fatah was the primary group they blamed for a lack of peace. Now, as this series is focused on whether Israel really helped to create and prop up Hamas, there are still other questions that need answers. So be sure to stay tuned for part 3 of this series, where we'll delve deeper into Netanyahu's agenda after the conclusion of the Second Intifada and the Qatari aid money's role in this conflict. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more in-depth analysis.
Yeah, do what he said. Closing thoughts, Care Bear?
Yeah, I did, but it's sorry, it escaped me for a second. But I don't know. Like, how can I say this so we don't get kicked off? I don't know. I think for me, it's the idea of, well, as you said, I think the first thing is how, well, I think at the core of it is essentially the idea of Arabs are the enemy. Like, Arabs are savages, they don't know any better, and like Islam is a radical religion, and like all of this stuff, especially that came out of 9/11. I think has fed into a lot of kind of what we're seeing now. But but it's interesting in just, I honestly, I never thought about it in terms of how Al-Qaeda and Hamas have been conflated, into more or less synonymous thing where they're not. And the idea that Hamas is strictly is a resistance group, like contrary to what we hear in mainstream media, but is a resistance group to support the liberation of Palestine. I think, which I kind of relate this, just to my own history, like in terms of resistance. Like, and I have to wonder, like, I do wonder about this. How is it, well, I say this with a grain of salt, but how is it that people can somewhat understand our need for resistance as Black people? And again, I'm saying that very loosely because I think while they might say they agree or understand it in theory, I'm sure, like, heart-wise, they don't. But I'll give people grace.
A lot of these people that are getting this wrong. Go ahead.
Like, how is it that people are able to accept, seemingly, my resistance, or at least my ancestors' resistance, but not necessarily of those in Palestine?
Yeah, well, I think anyone's resistance, like they compartmentalize that. These are the same people with the Gadsden flags on the wall. These are the same people who, still talk about give me liberty or give me death like it's, a rallying cry. Yet when people actually make that cry, fuck them, make them disappear. Like, and it just shows people don't care unless it actually applies to them, But, I hear people down here, well, it's like, I'd let them take 1 foot on my land, like, well, how about if 80% of your land has been taken from you? What then?
Right.
Like, plenty of AKs to go around, friend, So, like, I think there would be a lot more people willing to throw the resistance flags up in this regard if it was happening to them. But because it's some, brown people in the Middle East, they just tend to not care, unfortunately. So, yeah, I mean, and they don't really like the armed resistance your people had either, Collin, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying is that people
Right.
seemingly understand that.
Yeah.
But whether or not they truly do is another thing.
Yep. Well, as always, talking about these things are why we're demonetized. So you can go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork or scan that QR code on your screen and, send us some money if you're so inclined. We appreciate it. Any little bit helps. But if you can't do that, don't forget to like and subscribe if you aren't already. Hit that share button, send us to your friends, your families, your pets, see if they are able to read. I don't know. Like, you might have the thing set up for the kiddies to watch, but make sure to leave a comment. Let us know what you thought. We do actually read them and help Ian and get to 3K. Otherwise, thanks for watching. All right. Well, before we get to that, to the chats, Care Bear. Over on Rumble.
Yeah, make sure, friends, fam, that if you're watching and you're commenting, like, we read them. So make sure especially if it relates to the segment, make sure you put in your comments and we'll show you, to do that.
Yep. So Indian imperialism asked why it was called the Fez Plan. Apparently they lived in Fez, in Morocco. So, and apparently it's because the 12th Arab Summit convened in Fez on the 25th of November, but was then suspended during 6 to 9 September 1982. And it's also called the Fahd Plan, F-A-H-D, peace plan. That was like Saudi Grand Prince Fahd of Saudi Arabia was part of that plan. So, but anyway, you ready for our next one?
Yeah.
So, cool.
So this is the last story. This is an extra. This is more of a react, if anything else. So I think we've been kind of going a little heavy generally, but it's kind of nice to end on a somewhat lighter note tonight. So I found this clip, and I think actually we featured a portion of this clip at some point on the podcast,
probably.
But this is Harry Belafonte, King of Calypso, activist, actor, musician, all the things. He died recently. But this clip, I'm not sure how I stumbled upon it, but like I think I stumbled upon it over the weekend, and I was like, ooh, this could be worth a watch, especially given we're less than a week from the election. Next week we're probably gonna be doing the day after episode. But I think what Harry mentioned here, I think is going to be very. I think it's good. Like, he basically spoke in the prophetic in terms of how our government works, and I think the challenge that he was making to two special people on the panel that we come to know and love. Just kidding, but that I think the conversations are what we need to have. I think, especially in independent media, he kind of brings up here. So, and I'll be very interested to see if those conversations happen and where they land moving forward post-election. So just to give some context, he was at the Congressional Black Caucus, as I call them, the Congressional Black Crows event in 2005. So just to give some context, so nearly 20 years ago, where two people, again, and I'll just have you guys watch so you can kind of see. I'd rather not give away the surprise. But they're very prominent politicians, had their normal speeches or whatever. And then Mr. Belafonte kind of knocks both of them down in terms of what he says. So this is going to be long. I think this is about, I'll say, around 13 minutes, but I think it's worth every minute based on what he says. So we might stop, and we feel free to stop at any point where if you want to add a word in. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Some of these issues. What do you want to appeal to this audience to do, and to America watching this? What do we need to do to make sure that the issues that we have witnessed over the last month are not allowed to disappear? What's our charge from you?
You know, the last thing Dr. King said to me before he was murdered was in my home when we were sitting planning strategy for the Poor People's Campaign, which was on the horizon of the politics of the day. That's why he went to Memphis. And in the course of that meeting, he seemed distracted and a little under-focused. And when we asked him what was the matter, Martin said, you know, I've been thinking long and hard about our struggle. We worked tenaciously for our rights. And the culmination of all that effort will be reflected in what we've come to call the integration movement. And I sit here deeply concerned that I suspect we're leading our nation on an integration trip that has us integrating into a burning house. I don't think we quite understood how pathetic that remark was. After all, we're in the midst of a very heady moment in our struggle. We were winning on a lot of frontiers. Bull Connor had been confronted. The bus boycotts had worked. Votes were coming. Even Lyndon Baines Johnson had been struck by the spirit and got up and talked about we shall overcome in the Congress. And for Dr. King to have been in this place at a time when we seemed to be making.
So if you go back a second, if you go back a couple of frames, you could see who's sitting right next to him. So at the time, Senator Barack Obama and then Senator Clinton were sitting right next to him. So I think this is very significant that soon-to-be president and soon-to-be Secretary of State, they weren't either one of those roles yet, or happened to sitting next to him and you'll see, because Harry kind of rips it into, like, indirectly them, but mostly the Democratic Party. So yeah, let's continue.
To have been in this place at a time when we seemed to be making great headway was a moment to pause and reflect. That reflection has taken longer than I had suspected it would, but it has certainly come to reveal itself fully when we look at the condition in which we find not only our world, but in particular, our nation. The wreckage that's taking place down in the Gulf region, in the southwest part of the United States, is not the only wreckage that exists. We have a lot of wreckages around this country. And perhaps the most distracting and perhaps the most important wreckage to take a look at is really the wreckage of the Democratic Party.
get him to the stage.
I've been a Democrat all my life. I have no treaty with the Republicans, nor do I really seek one. But the Democratic Party was not always our friend. As a matter of fact, a lot of what we had to struggle against was in the possession and the power of Democrats who came from the South. And when we showed them the tenaciousness and the conviction.
Yeah, and what about those blue dog Democrats? How about them? Is that the ones you're talking about? You mean the one that's married to one and is one sitting to the left of you?
I mean, today's Democrats are yesterday's Republicans, and yesterday's Republicans are currently Democrats. So it's like all the same. So, but yeah, I loved how he kind of mentioned, and especially with those two sitting next to him, you know, it's just kind of like in his, and I'm just paraphrasing what he said, but basically, Democrats, you're shit. So, and you're just as racist. He didn't say that, but I'm making that case for him. You know, you're just as racist as the Republican. Well, what we have currently as Democrats were born from Republicans. No, actually, it was vice versa. But, you know, but there's still a lot that white supremacist, racist, every ist you can think of that exists within the Democratic Party as well. But again, this is Congressional Black Caucus. So it's funny how a lot of these idiots are laughing and kind of, and you'll see it that a lot of them are kind of ooh and ahhing and maybe somewhat agreeing with him, but they don't do shit. So again, just there for the vibes, just to listen probably to Harry Belafonte kind of speak, but not necessarily take in what he's saying, and definitely not taking any action by them.
Yeah.
So, but you can go ahead.
And the sense of great purpose that the people of this nation had into transforming our condition. All those Democrats from the South ran off and became Republicans as an act of punishment for what we were trying to achieve as a people. And that punishment continues to play itself out. Eleanor Roosevelt was a close friend, and once sitting in Hyde Park with her, she told a story about a great black leader by the name of A. Philip Randolph. He was one of the great giants of the century, certainly one of the great thinkers. And she recalled an evening when A. Philip Randolph had been invited to a dinner at the White House. And just he and her and the President, Franklin Roosevelt. And during the course of the dinner, the President invited Mr. Randolph to speak his thoughts. And for a long time, A. Philip Randolph held forth on every list of grievances he could think of, for the people of the labor movement, for the people who were poor, for black people, and Roosevelt permitted him to hold forth without any interruption until he concluded. At the end of it, Roosevelt reached for a box of cigars, passed one around to Philip, and as he slowly lit the cigar, he turned to Philip Randolph and he said, "Philip, let me tell you, I've heard everything you've said. I've missed absolutely nothing, and there's nothing that you've said that I disagree with. And I do, in fact, have the platform to be able to make the transformation work that you're looking for, and I guess we're all looking for. I have just one request of you, and it is for you to go out and make me do it." It seems to me that there'll be no loftier statements and no greater speeches to be made than have already been made. Certainly Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, Fannie Lou Hamer down in Atlantic City when she challenged with the Freedom Mississippi Democratic Party. There are a lot of people who have made speeches that are as eloquent as will ever be written. And we've listened to a lot of redundancy. A lot of people who have carefully selected the phrases and applied them to the moment. What eludes us is the bankruptcy of the action itself. This poverty that our country is witnessing has never gone away. Most of the politicians I know of have visited these places of poverty. They make it their business when they're running for the highest office in this nation to go into the heart of our pain, our anguish, our indignities, and make promises only to walk into the places of power and then deny us. I guess part of the reason I'm here is to really look through the ravages of the Democratic Party and see if anything is really worth salvaging.
After this?
Oh, go back and play that. Let's play that back. play that in a few seconds because he said something.
Highest office in this nation. To go into the heart of our pain, our anguish, our indignities, and make promises only to walk into the places of power and then deny us.
It's up here. What were you saying?
Well, like the squad is done, like Richie Torres did.
Well, no, even like what both of them, Obama and Hillary, did.
Yep.
You know, like they didn't deviate. Like Obama brought in hope and change. Like Hillary, I remember, like as a team, was talking about universal healthcare when she was the first lady.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like they talk a good game, but as he was saying there, it's like the absence of action in like their words.
Yeah.
So, you know, so it's the idea of he talks about redundancy, and it's very much like what we're seeing with Kamala right now. It's like
never let anyone take your joy from you.
Right. But it's like the words may be nice, maybe redundant, but the words may be nice. But it's the idea of like, and this is the argument that I say, you know, to people who are supporting Democrats. It's like, and I'll probably get more into this later. It's like, okay, so, you know, there's a fear mongering about Project 2025 right now. Okay, fine. Like, Democrats, what's your Project 2025 plan? You know, what's your vision in terms of where you want this country to be? You know, like, you know, not Democrats, Republicans kind of tell us already what they plan to do. So, Democrats, what's your plan to counter?
Usually the same as the Republicans. That's about it.
Usually, but if you pretend that you are for the people, at least make them pretend. But that's the thing, they pretend.
They never do.
You know?
And we're not the first people to tell them this either. Like, Harry's telling them right now to their face, and they're still like, fuck it. You know, like once he'll die in a couple of years anyway, and we can continue to do what we want. You know, like I think this is why Obama had to pander to a much more liberal base at the time. You know, not that he did anything either, but he at least had to pander harder. But they're, you know, at this point they're like, especially with Republicans as a big giant scapegoat for them. You know, like it's but Trump, the end of time. So, like, I honestly want him to get another term in office so they can't have him again as an excuse. You know, like it won't be him. So
No, but it'll be the next boogeyman after him, who more likely will be younger, smarter, and probably more dangerous than Trump will ever be.
Yeah.
So,
and probably someone the Democrats liked to fight, you know, like, anyway, I'm speculating, but anyway, we'll get some more into it.
I guess part of the reason I'm here is to really look through the ravages of the Democratic Party and see if anything is really worth salvaging.
It ain't. Like, it ain't worth salvaging. This was a while ago, and it still ain't fucking fixed to shit. So
This is the wild thing. Like, this is why I wanted to play this, because what he's saying here, this was almost 20 years ago. It's still relevant now.
Yep.
Nothing has changed since then. So I argue since then it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
And again, the idea that we've had two leaders who have since moved on to higher levels of office since this talk, they heard this and they did nothing to justify. If anything, they more or less confirmed what he was saying here. So yeah, so he wasn't speaking in the prophetic in terms of what we're seeing now, but he was also speaking in the prophetic of what those two will end up doing. And, you know, it's wild. But go ahead.
Because when Dr. King said, we're integrated into a burning house, we said to him, what do we do about it? He said, we're just going to have to go out and become firemen. Well, maybe that's what my humble task is. To find the truck, get the hose, and know where to turn it on. This country...
Yeah, and I think what he said there with having to be the fireman, like, unfortunately, like, that's the media's job, and they don't do a good job at that. But so I feel like that's come to us. Like, we should be the ones that are essentially putting out those, well, not even putting out those fires, but I think kind of exposing, you know, the ideas that people might be misled. And kind of expose it or kind of bring a light to it so people can have a better understanding of the reality of, you know, what's hidden or what might be covered up. But I feel like even in independent media now, it's become so muddled now that we're not even doing, generally speaking, I don't feel we're generally doing a good job of that. So, but no, I think that's the kind of the frustrating part for me is because we should be a part of that fireman squad that he's talking about. And I think even in this space, because people, you know, whether due to clout or, you know, making this a career and like not, you know, like, you know, making it about the growth of their channel versus actually caring about these are people and what they need. And like, I don't know, like, and you hear me all the time. That's why I kind of get frustrated at times, even being in this space, because it's like, I feel that people are necessarily serious in terms of what we're meant to do in the space. Does that kind of make any sense to you?
It does. And I don't even think serious is the right word, because I don't care if you're goofing off at the same time, but you know, there's work that still actually has to be done while you're doing that. So,
right.
You know, and I wish people will learn that engagement is a big portion of this, that you can't engage with shit unless you want more of it, you know? So that's part of it. You know, everyone's ambulance chasing all the time. But anyway,
reveals its moral decay every day of its existence. Our prisons, the largest prison system in the world, are filled with those who are the victims of poverty. The women who are disenfranchised, young teenage mothers, are victims of poverty. Poverty is knocking at our door all day long. It sits in the mirror for us to look in every morning. When we look at what's going on with the schools in this country, we build more prisons than we build schools. We have more young black men and women in the prisons of America than we have in the universities. Poverty is in our face all day long. Why is everybody behaving all of a sudden like this is some great revelation?
He is here? Are they both here right now?
Yeah. And I'll tell you something, there's a lot of people out here who are really pissed off. We are angry, we're upset, we're sad, we hold our children, we wheel our wheelchairs, we look around for some comfort, and we don't find any. Well, we have to look to ourselves. Because I think the last frontier of truth and hope in this country are the people themselves.
And I think he said it here. It's like people are angry, people are tired, people are just kind of tired of doing the status quo. And because we vote like every 4 years and we don't see any of these changes happening in their communities. And this is why I get so pissed with people who kind of like, you have to vote, especially for me as a black person, like your ancestors fought for your right to vote and you have to do it. And like, you know, it's not gonna, like, things are not gonna get better like soon, like you have to work at it. None of the above. And my response to that is, you know, like, change can come overnight if Congress really wanted to. You know, it's just a matter of will and courage if they wanted things to change overnight.
I don't care about you. I just want your vote. I don't care.
Right. But that's just it. It's like they just want our vote just to do more of the same shit or to maybe tweak around the edges. And this is kind of my frustration of the Democrat Party. And as I was saying earlier, it's like, what is the fuck is your comprehensive, like, if you're going to, like, the idea that Trump is still a thing should not be. Theoretically. He should not be, like, if Democrats did what they were supposed to do, Trump wouldn't be a thought in people's minds right now. But because people are so pissed, and because we're kind of ingrained with the idea of, like, we only have two choices to vote in the election, of course people are going to vote for Trump. Because if they're not disenchanted with the Democrats, who else is there? And you badger people into being like, well, third party is not an option right now, so you vote one way or the other, but you have to vote Democrat because at least Democrats at least make the effort. You know, and I argue they don't make enough of an effort to make a difference in people's lives. Or at least, and this is the argument that I make generally to people, and then we can move on. It's the idea, like, and I've said this so many times, like, I got my student loans canceled like in the beginning of the year. Like, granted, I also know that there's a lot of fuck shit around that system right now that people may or may not have had theirs canceled, but I had mine canceled, and I'm grateful for that. So at least Biden did something right, at least for the people that I would argue got lucky to end up getting their student loans canceled. You know, but I felt that tangibly.
Yeah, but that wasn't him.
So
it wasn't him with yours, but it also wasn't him with theirs now. Like, that wasn't him.
But what I'm saying, what I'm saying is that regardless, I felt that change tangibly in my life.
Sure.
People are not necessarily feeling that, yeah, they could do all these policies, you know, come hell or high water. But if people are not seeing it, if people are not feeling it, then they're not going to resonate with the idea of, like, oh, that we did this and we did that and they did the other. People need to see and feel change. And if they're not seeing and feeling it, they're going to be disenchanted very easily.
That's the thing, because you can't vote out the people right now who don't want change and are very comfortable with the system as it is. Because they have too much power, too much money. They aren't elected officials, right? They're who your elected officials listen to and get funding from and whatever. You know, you can't vote out the WEF and the Bilderberg Group and you have to attack them in other manners, and people are not willing to do those things because those are hard. Voting's easy, theoretically.
Right.
I know it's hard in some particular areas, but you know, and we talked about the system's been rigged now for far too long, and you know, shout out Convo Couch for doing a ton of work in that regard. You know, so yeah, I mean, good luck with that as your solution. So, you know, how does Kwame Ture put it? You know, we play it for every beginning of the show. Like, he ain't voting, so he's not a Democrat.
Right.
Sort of thing. So, yeah, anyway.
And I think our honorable senator is absolutely right. I'm not that much interested in 06. It's just another date for a lot of rich folks and a lot of anger, and for a lot of opportunists, a lot of people to go out and do their thing yet again. I'm interested in something much bigger, something much longer, and it's going to take much more time than just 06 to fix it. You know, we look at these things in terms of sound bites and short-term efforts. It's going to take longer than that. And I think we have to serve notice that we're looking for a second party. Some people suggest that two exist. I say there's really one. It comes in various grades of difference.
Hey, uniparty.
The American people have some decisions to make. Our foreign policy has made a wreck of this planet. I'm always in Africa. That's my business. I move among the poor. I move among the tragic. I move among those who are the victims of human and moral disaster. And when I move to these places, I see American policy written on the walls of oppression everywhere.
Yep.
And I occasionally see some representative from our Congress or from our government coming to visit, coming to take another look, to get some more facts, to come back and to make a report. We don't need an independent committee to find out what happened and what is happening to this country. Our last independent committee told us. And Bush and the arrogance of these people to go off again and play the same scenario because they know that we ain't going to make a difference before where they want to go has to be changed. We have to give them a call to a new awakening. We know when they give a contract, a no-bid contract to Halliburton, we know what they did when they gave that contract to Halliburton in Iraq. We know what they do when they suspend minimum wage and go out and get immigrants to come in and to do the dirty work. And in suspending the minimum wage are setting black people and brown people and immigrants and men and women against one.
I mean, 20 years ago, what are we talking about now? The immigrant population, and again, tied to foreign policy. You know, like, as I said, part of the reason why I cannot vote for Kamala is Rwanda for me.
Yep.
Like, I've been to the Kigali Memorial Center. I've seen the graves. I've talked to people on the ground in terms of the genocide that they're still healing from, that the U.S. was complicit in as well, in addition to the UK. So I cannot in good... No, but that's why I'm like, people are like, well, you got to. No, I don't, because I've been in those spaces where our policy has affected others in the global south. And for me, it's kind of like, I cannot in good conscience vote for people who essentially were also complicit in that genocide as well.
Because that makes you complicit, which you are not willing to be. Can't blame you.
Right. Right.
Makes sense to me. Not hard. And the fact that you have to explain it to people is the fucking, like, yeah, I just don't anymore. You know?
I think for me, because even with that added bit for me,
yeah,
like the gymnastics that people will still do to kind of justify that I need to vote, and well, I have to vote, period, but I need to vote in their way. No, you want me to vote your way out of your comfort, not mine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, or your conscience, not mine.
Yep.
Certainly not for people anywhere around the world who are policy. But
like, no one's earned my vote yet.
Right.
So, anyway, we'll let Mr. Belafonte continue.
We have about a minute left with him.
It's not much.
So.
One another, when we should in fact be uniting. So I would hope that while the Black Caucus celebrates this moment, while we have all these wonderful black leaders and our white progressive associates,
I hope he was
that we would get off the rhetoric, get off the redundancy, and dig deep into this country, and let George W. Bush, let the Christian right, let a whole bunch of folks that's running away with this nation know that their legs have just been amputated. I'll rest my case.
I think we're good there. Yeah. But yeah, again, this was 20 years ago. Now, the only thing was, I think, especially toward the end, like he was going in more on Republicans, and that's, you know, very easy for them to kind of be, the Republicans suck. But no, I think that kind of went over their heads that, no, a lot of that, he was talking about y'all.
Like you were about to do a Popeyes commercial there for a second. Love that chicken from Popeyes. I thought you were hitting that shit, dog. You know?
But I mean, yeah, I just felt this was so appropriate, just given what we've seen and heading into this last week. But I also saw this tweet a couple of days ago from at the Acumen, Ashley Stevens. And I totally agree with her sentiment here. I think I shared this with you, didn't I?
I don't think so.
No, I definitely shared it with you. But she said,
yeah,
post
I think you did.
2024, yeah, I did share it with you. Post 2024 election organizing is going to look different for me because I can't organize with people I know who would offer me up as a sacrifice of they felt like it would benefit them and sell it as liberation. Like, there's no real building without trust, and I do not trust you all. I don't care what none of y'all say because I see what you do. So moving forward, I know solidarity with you all is subject to terms and conditions. So I keep one eye on you too and move accordingly. Yeah, we can organize together for voting rights, but I doubt your willingness to include current and former incarcerated folks. Y'all got limits and conditions on who deserves equity and justice. Now I know every move you make is rooted in self, even at the expense of others. Now I got to use your selfishness against you and adjust my politic accordingly. Change how I show up in community and make a difference for those who continue to be left behind or forgotten. Because this here isn't working for me. I got to be able to look at myself in the mirror. And so I think what Ashley's saying here, I think kind of aligns with what Harry was saying 20 years ago. Is the idea of like, people are angry, but people are using their own comfort to justify really, truly continue to live in the status quo and to ignore the needs of others less fortunate than them. And so, and this here is kind of, now I argue, I've been here since 2020. Yeah. Like, George Floyd, that whole mess broke my ass in terms of seeing people like that summer, obviously it was under Trump, like being like, as I say, you know, like being Malcolm X for a minute. But then the moment that Biden got into office, it was just like hands off, dust off, and they all went home. And it's kind of like, what did we get out of Biden being president? You know, like things haven't gotten better. If anything, I would argue from now, things have gone worse. And I'm sure, like, if Kamala becomes president again, like, it'll be the same thing, you know. But I think what she's saying there is like, it's true. I think for me, and I think for others like me, we have to be very careful of who we organize with. And I think even within the space, and I know we talked about this at length, like, we also need to be very careful who we kind of let into the independent media space. Because in terms of, again, like intentions, people may not always have the best intentions. And so, and I hate saying this because generally I'm a more guarded person anyway, but having to be more guarded in terms of organizing, I think, is a necessary thing at this point.
Don't trust the liberals. They will betray you.
Right, exactly. Like, they will betray you. And I think we've definitely, at some point within the last 4 years, have been betrayed by people, you know, in the space and otherwise. And, you know, I think this is just a call to kind of move differently if we want to see actual progress, you know, being made for ourselves and in light of this country.
Interesting. I also found it interesting. Have you read any of the Kwame Ture book you sent me? Like, I've gotten into like the first chapter, like, and I put it down, not just because ADHD means I will have to come back to it. But it talked about, like, his first chapter was about him growing up in, I mean, he's Trinidad, right? So,
Trinidad.
But he talked about like local calypso as being part of his like essence, and the reason he became such a revolutionary, right, was because this like sense of community in the calypso stuff, where it's like every community has a community steel drum band, and like it was like built and put together, and these locations to play were built and put together, and an important part of the society there, right? The dance halls and whatever. But I know Belafonte also comes from that same cloth, right?
Yeah, because his family is Jamaican. His family is from the Caribbean. I believe his dad was Jamaican. So yeah,
Jamaican. So
yeah, so yeah, I
But-
think obviously, but yeah, for me growing up with Calypso, they're political. They're politically minded music. You can argue. I would argue in some
same
ways.
thing with dub and reggae and all that stuff became.
Dub,
I mean,
reggae,
Marley
and probably even hip hop, at least back in the day before it got
co-opted and manipulated. There's still some, not all, you know, some I assume are good people. But like I you know, I felt like it was relevant to at least bring a white guy from Florida from being able to do some Calypso. I feel like that's at least some, you know, musical colonialism that actually is worth shit.
Yeah. So
but
shout out to Jesse who did a cover of Kingston Town.
Yeah.
And shout out to Jesse for pulling this clip for us at the last minute. But I think given that we talked about, well, reacted to Harry's scorcher of a sermon to Barack and Hillary,
might
I
as
think
well
this
bring
will
his
be the
music
perfect
too.
plan to end tonight and just give you know, remembrance to him in what he, you know, may not
And-
necessarily agree with everything, but like in terms
Go
of what
watch
he was trying to.
last night's American Tradition on the channel. If you haven't watched that on Tuesday, you know, go check those out. Jesse every other week gives you some good stuff. So, you know, keep eyes on it. But anyway, we'll
Let's end with
let
Jesse.
Jesse close this out.
Down the way where the nights are gay, the sun shines daily on the mountain top. I took a trip on a sailing ship, and when I reached Jamaica, I made a stop. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way. Won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston Town. Sounds of laughter everywhere, and the dancing girls sway to and fro. I must declare my heart is there, though I've been from Maine to Mexico. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way. Won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston Town. Down at the market you can hear ladies cry out while on their heads they bear ackee rice, salt fish are nice, and the rum is fine any time of year. But I'm sad to say I'm on my way. Won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston Town. Sad to say I'm on my way. Won't be back for many a day. My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston Town. There you go. Larry Belafonte.
All right. R.I.P. Harry. Rest in power. Like 96.
For real.
We should all live such a full, long life, making such an impact and fighting the struggle.
Yep.
And
being outspoken as fuck.
Hell yeah. Doing it his way.
Yeah. And yeah, so thank you, Harry, for your prophetic words. And I think for me personally, thinking of how we should move forward, you know, after next week. So it'll be interesting to see I think even within the space of conversations that we're going to be having, because we're going to need it. Yeah, so I think that's it for our shows for tonight. So yeah, if you want more content like this, and again, shout out to Jesse, our brother from INN, being able to give a cover of the late great Halle Belafonte. Feel so free to scan the QR code on your phone if you want to donate, or you can go to the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of your screen, or if you're in chat right now, you can type in !donate and be able to give there. Any donation helps, even as little as $1 will be very great. We'll be extremely grateful for that. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that we're able to continue producing content like this and being able to fight the suppression that we see on YouTube. And make sure you leave a comment. So let us know what you think of what Harry said. Do you resonate with what he said? Do you disagree? Let us know. And help INN get to 3K so that we're able to continue growing and continue to bring more content like this. And once again, as always, thank you for watching.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, that's our show, fam. So what do we got coming up this week? It's weird because a bunch of schedules are fucked.
Yeah. So
me and Indy won't be doing Sunday. I know that.
Right. Indy's going on a well-deserved vacation. I hope he actually takes advantage of it. Is there politically homeless tomorrow? I would assume.
I would assume so. Always, best way to keep up with what we're doing is go down there to that little Twitter link at Get Any News. Find us on there. We put updates out for when shows are doing a thing. You can click that bell on YouTube. It might notify you. That kind of stuff. But otherwise,
Angel.
Yeah.
That's
probably be talking about the Yankees.
Probably. And then clip show for American Tradition on Friday. I would think, right?
I would think so.
Because anyone. Okay. Saturday, wrestling with Angel at 8. Right. Okay.
Yep.
I should remember.
We can never. Yeah, my brain can only hold so many things.
So no. How do we miss that? On Sunday.
Yep.
Maple Piles potentially on Monday.
Yep.
And then politically homeless potentially on. Well, no, they're going to be doing something for sure.
Yeah, and I think Heidi Benner's been taking part with that too. So go check that out.
And then we'll be here next Wednesday for the after.
Yep.
If we know something by then, and we might have a guest. We'll see. We have to check in with them to confirm.
Yep.
We thought they would have been here tonight, but guess not. So we'll let you know if we do have a special guest on next week. But
yep.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to next week. I am not.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah, except that people are going to be sad either way, but it's just what level of sad are we going to see next Wednesday? So that will be. But yeah, you can. But yeah, you can join us, fam, next Wednesday if you want to. I don't know.
I don't want to do this no more.
Yeah, probably something like that. We'll see. But as Harry said, the hope is in y'all, and we love you all, and you will be the change that, if anything's going to happen, it will come from you, regardless of where you are and your political affiliation. As Harry said, we got to stick together. So we plan to do that, at least for here, and we hope that you're able to do that with the people that you're closest with, or not, but we all we got. Because for sure, neither party likes us anyway.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Try and have a good week, everyone. And happy
Hasta la
Halloween.
vista, baby.
And
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Bye, have a great time.
you